Hello everyone. So in this video, I'm going to be explaining one of Politics and War's most complicated concepts. It's called chaining. Lots of new players find it very difficult to understand, and lots of older ones still sort of trip over it as well. So chaining is essentially defending the ally of an ally from another attack. It would be like if Russia invaded Ukraine, but Ukraine had a treaty to Denmark, and then Denmark had a treaty to the US. Would the US then have to defend Ukraine? It's kind of a gray area, and it's just a hypothetical. So I want to try and explain this in Politics and War and show you how the norms in this game shape how you should respond to this type of thing. Because there are cases where you should defend the allies of your ally, and then there's also cases where you cannot. And yeah, people really don't understand it. So in this example, we are the protector, right? Because yeah, most times this comes up in the form of like a protectorate relationship, because the protectorate will have another ally and they want to defend them, and it gets complicated. Anyway, so yeah, we're the protector in this. So we have a mandatory defensive treaty with the protectorate, and then that protectorate has a mandatory defensive treaty with their ally. A random enemy alliance launches an unjustified war on this ally. An unjustified war is any war which is basically offensive, that is not related to a treaty, right? So if the protectorate then attacked the enemy, this would be a justified war because they'd be acting on this defensive treaty. If this ally had actually hit the enemy first, right, and these people had merely responded, then if the protectorate came in as well, that attack would also be unjustified. See? So basically we're trying to determine who is the aggressor. So I'm going to switch that back. Okay, so this is a very common scenario. And in this scenario, then the enemy will also expand their attack to, why is that so annoying? To the protectorate, right? Because they're going to respond to the attack on them, right? Even if it's a completely justified attack, right? You're still going to respond. So they'll launch some counters, or they'll just fight back. And in this scenario, if the ally and the protectorate win, awesome, right? We don't have to get involved. However, if this enemy is really strong and they win, which is often true, then hey, look, this protectorate, they're losing, right? That sucks because we have this mandatory treaty to them that says we have to protect them. You know, we have to keep them safe at all costs. And clearly we're not doing that. That's not happening. So have we broken our obligation if we don't defend? Doesn't mean we have to attack the enemy. And is our war then justified because they attacked our protectorate? No, not really, right? Because this is a reaction, then this war is justified. And this war here, it is also justified. It's a very interesting scenario, right? So as the protector, do we have a justified reason to attack this enemy? Well, no. Because this war here, the enemy's war on our protectorate, that's justified, right? They're acting defensively. Even if this is an offensive war, they're acting defensively here. And because it's a defensive war against our protectorate, then if we attack the enemy, we're acting offensively. And if that enemy has other allies, enemy ally, and they have a defensive treaty, like so, then this enemy ally then has to attack us, and they're justified. Right? So this is why chaining is so complicated in Politics and War. And I'm gonna try and box this in again. Because people will, is there a way to send this backwards? Send to back. All of this here will be considered, actually I wonder if there's a way to make it slightly more transparent. I don't think there is. Anyway, all of this here will be considered the original war. The original war. And then this larger conflict, send it back, will then be considered the Greater War. The original war and the Greater War, they aren't, like, I guess, they aren't strong terms, kind of like they're not treaties. They're not something that people will go, oh, like there's a rule that this is the original war, so it matters. That's not how it works. The original war and the Greater War are just sort of what people perceive the conflict to be, right? So if you talk to people in news servers, they'll go, well, oh, this was the original war, and this is the Greater War. And the Greater War is always perceived to have less legitimacy than the original war. Right? Because all of these other people don't have a real stake in this conflict. They don't really matter. They're fighting for reasons that they don't even understand at this point. The original conflict is the only one that has real reasons behind it. So in a chaining war, then these parties can impose terms on each other. Or in the original war, they can impose terms on each other. But parties in the Greater War typically cannot impose terms on each other, which means that the original war has stakes and the Greater War has no stakes. There's some other... I'm trying to think if there's any other interesting ideas. Oh, there is. Okay, so I'm going to simplify this back down to... Actually, how would I simplify it? We're going to remove this, remove these for now. So it's back to this original dichotomy. What if this enemy is not attacking their ally? Oh. Stupid brave. But attacking the ally of their ally. And this treaty... Actually, is that... Yeah, okay, we'll do extended chaining and then we'll do optional chaining. What about this scenario, right? So we're protecting this alliance and they have an MDP treaty to their ally who has an MDP treaty to their ally is being attacked by the enemy. This ally then defends them, which is justified. And then the enemy responds to that by attacking them. And then this protectorate then hits the ally for attacking them. Same scenario where this attack is aggressive, right? Because they don't have a treaty to the original combatant. However, because they have... How do I put it? Because these are all MDPs, right? It's not a protectorate. Then it's perceived as slightly more legitimate. So this is actually somewhat of a gray area. And it will kind of depend on which alliance you speak to. It should be quite simple for all the reasons I mentioned earlier, but it's not for whatever reason. So yeah, back to this. The enemy alliance attacks the ally. What if this treaty here is not an MDP, a defensive treaty, but actually an optional defense treaty? So if it's an optional defense treaty, then this alliance does not have a mandatory reason to defend this ally, but it has the option to do so. So if they attack, it's still justified, but it's a gray area. And in most scenarios, an attack by the protector would not only be considered like an aggressive attack in this scenario, but like a seriously aggressive attack, right? You're joining a war that even your protectorate didn't need to get involved in, so you really have no reason to get involved. You also have an MDOHP treaty. So then this is an optional aggression. It's a defensive plus optional aggression treaty. Just leave that like that. Okay, so I got a little confused myself, so I'm skipping ahead to this scenario. So in this scenario, our alliance has a mutual defense and optional aggression treaty with our ally, and they have a defensive treaty to another ally, which is being attacked. So, in this scenario, then this ally will fight back, justified war. This ally will then fight back, justified war. However, because this is an optional aggression treaty, then we can also join this war. Now, you would think, because it's an MDOAP, that this war would be justified, right? Our alliance versus the enemy. You would think it would be justified, but it isn't. The optional aggression clause in PNW is completely useless. And people really do not understand this. Even big alliances do not understand this. The optional aggression clause gives your alliance the right to attack offensively, right? And a right that all alliances innately possess anyway. Which means this is still aggressive. And even if this were aggressive, like it doesn't matter, it doesn't change anything. Even if all of these were aggressive wars somehow, like it doesn't make any of them more or less legitimate. The mutual defense optional aggression treaty does nothing, and I need to hammer that home because people, they just do not understand this. I will explain the roots of it because that might help a bit. So in Politics and War's precursor game, Cyber Nations, then chaining worked in a slightly different way because alliances did not have the inherent right to attack other alliances, right? So you would need to use an MDP with an MDP to another MDP to attack the enemy you wanted to attack. And all wars needed to be defensive, or have a valid CB, which is a justification for war, which is essentially defensive. So yeah, that was a thing in CN, which explained the optional aggression treaty, right? It meant that if your ally had somehow fallen into an offensive war, if it didn't have a valid reason, then you could come in as well. You could attack aggressively as well. But yeah, we have that in Politics and War. We have the inherent right to undertake offensive operations. So the MDOAP means nothing. I hate chaining so much. Chaining is madness. No one understands it, and because no one understands it, they all get it wrong. So in many scenarios, then you'll have this situation play out, and even the enemy will think you are obligated to attack them. And this may lead the enemy to launch offensive wars against you preemptively, thinking that you're going to attack them as well, and that this is justified. You can see how, new players would lose their minds. Because all of this will happen. All of this will just randomly play out, and people will tell them, oh, no, this is how it actually is, right? This is how chaining makes sense. I was taught this by my grandpappy who came from CN. And it's, no, No, even if they came from CN, they probably didn't understand this. Because, again, chaining worked very differently in CN. In CN, you were expected to do these long chains. In PNW, these long chains aren't legitimate. They aren't justified in the same way. I also forgot about this scenario, which is also super common, and you can think of it like chaining squared. So, in this scenario, then the enemy attacks the ally of our ally, that ally responds defensively, and then our ally launches a justified war on the enemy because of their treaty to the ally of the ally. Cool. The enemy has their own ally, the enemy ally, who then perceives this war as offensive, right? Because it's unprovoked. This enemy alliance has not done anything to our ally. So they will launch their own justified war against our ally. And because this enemy ally is not being hit by our ally, not directly, then we perceive this war as offensive, even though it's completely legitimate. So then we can launch our own justified war against the enemy ally. And if they have allies, you can see how this can go on forever, right? It's madness. If they have their own allies, then this final loop repeats ad infinitum. It's madness. It is. This is why chaining is so hard to understand. It's why everyone argues over it. And at the end of the day, everyone will either run out of allies or they will run out of people that are willing to honor their treaties. This is also how a lot of big wars started in Politics and War's early days, and also in some of the precursor games like Cyber Nations. Chaining is like the most ludicrous concept in Politics and War, but it's also fundamental in that everyone will deal with some form of it on a day-to-day basis or in negotiations. And I just wish you all the best, right? Because it's going to be hard to make sense of it sometimes. Especially if, in this scenario, for example, let's say this enemy defeats the ally, or defeats the ally of the ally and your ally. So both of these alliances lose. How do I even show that? Yeah, both of these alliances lose. We defeat this alliance, and then both of us win. Right, but we can't attack each other unless we launch offensive wars, which for many reasons we probably shouldn't do. This has happened many times. And then they impose terms on their ally, on the ally of the ally, and then we impose terms on the enemy ally. It's so stupid. And there's no avoiding it. I wish I could say, like, at the end of the video, like, I mean, this is why we should never let this happen, but we can't. We can't, because it will always happen. Now you understand chaining, or you don't understand chaining. I understand it a little bit. Yeah, we're gonna see how this pans out. This is kind of a complicated one. Why did I choose this one to start it off with?